Hey everyone, Questing Scribe here, and today we'll be going over 4 beginner tips for those looking to get into roleplay. Most of these tips can be applied to roleplay in general, but this video will pay special attention to roleplaying in MMOs and other multiplayer games. So to kick things off, let's look at the very first decision you have to make when roleplaying inside video games. Are you going to be roleplaying over voice or using text? So, looking at the written roleplay versus the voiced roleplay. This is more or less going to be a personal decision that you're going to have to make based off of whatever your comfort level is, and also your interest, and also the type of game you're playing. So some games might be where you only have text, like so Final Fantasy XIV, text is your only option. There is no voice chat in that game. Whereas with something like GTA Online, most of that is done over voice. If any of you have watched any of the popular streamers that do it, and I've had some friends that have roleplayed in that game themselves, and that's all voice. Now, the difference between the two, like I said, beyond the comfort level, it's also kind of where your skill set and your interest lies, because a voiced roleplay session, you're very much taking on the role of a voice actor or an actor. You know, this is you that is playing this part. So you have to be comfortable with maybe showing emotion, maybe some people like doing a funny voice. You have to be comfortable with just expressing yourself just over voice. Whereas through the written form, while you don't have to worry about expressing yourself through voice, the hang up that some people do run into is the barrier of writing. Not a lot of people really enjoy writing, like some do, but not a lot really enjoy it, not a lot. Everyone's also at a different level, and that can also create a certain sense of, it can make certain people really conscious of how they write. Or stepping into a scene, like if they're seeing everyone else that's role-playing in this scene is really good, they might be hesitant, thinking, well, you know, what if what they type isn't good enough? Or what if, you know, their story isn't good enough? No matter what I will say when it comes to either choice, no matter which choice you pick, when you enter the roleplay scene, just be aware that everyone roleplays at different levels, but all of you are there for the same goal. You're all there to have fun, and you are all there to tell a collective story. And even your best role players they're very good at pulling newer people in, making people feel comfortable. And, you know, no one's really going to judge you if you are there authentically. And that's the important thing. Now, tip number 2, backstory. So this is a hang-up that I've seen personally when I used to roleplay back in Final Fantasy XIV. I ran into quite a few people that would come up to me and tell me that they want to roleplay, but they've been having trouble thinking of a backstory for their character, and they want to get it down perfect, before they jump into the game. Like, they really want this backstory down perfect. And I'll say here what I've told all of them. Backstory is not needed if you're really jumping in for the first time. You don't need that. Don't bog yourself down with backstory and trying to come up with the history from when they were a child all the way up to an adult. What you should set up for your characters. So to really, like, if you're new to roleplay, or if you're simply looking to jump into like a scene very quickly, here are what I would say 2 things are very important. The first is, what is your character in the present? Who are they? This is essentially, what are they doing? Like, so to use one of my characters as an example, when I first jumped into roleplay, she was a scout and a cartographer. That's what she did. And a lot of the roleplay, like during her introductions to people, that's how she introduced herself, as a scout and a cartographer. The second thing that you want to keep in mind for your character is, what is their current goal? Now, this is pretty important because this gives you an idea where you want to drive your roleplay. Now, this goal does not need to be necessarily something in the far future. This can be something for that very day. Like, you can jump into a roleplay, and maybe your character's goal is they've shown up at a tavern, and they just want to order whatever, like, the most popular dish that's served in this tavern is. That can be the goal for the day. You know, maybe it's something more lofty. For my character that I was talking about earlier, her goal was she wanted to explore all corners of Eorzea. So everything that she did or talked about, not everything that she talked about, but like whenever it came up tying into her story, or if I wanted to respond, I would always think back to, okay, well, what does she want to do? What is her goal? Like, okay, she's an explorer. So she might, if someone says, hey, you know, I plan on getting on a ship and taking a trip up to Old Charlian, she might say, oh yeah, I'll go with you. So that's what you want to set up. And it's pretty quick to do. And you don't have to worry about a backstory. Because to be honest, as you're role-playing in the game, the backstory will come to you. And even if people ask you certain things, you can talk about it on the fly. Like if you're in a conversation with someone and they ask, hey, you know, do you have any siblings? You haven't written that down, but you can make it up right then and there. Maybe you say, okay, yeah, you're going to have them have 2 siblings. And you mentioned, yeah, I have 2 siblings. And all you have to do is just make a note to yourself that, hey, during this RP, I've established that my character now has 2 siblings. And if you want to, later on, you can build out who those siblings are, what they do. But, like, essentially don't worry about creating things until you know it's going to be relevant, because you don't want to spend weeks or months coming up with a backstory. You know, you got to remember, collaborative storytelling. Your backstory is, it's like the icing on the cake for your character. It just rounds them out. Now, you might get into role plays in the future where the backstory becomes very prominent, but definitely for your first jump-ins, just don't worry too much about what your character's, you know, has done in the past. Now, for tip number 3, try new ideas and don't be afraid to pivot if needed. So what do I mean by this? Role-playing, the goal of roleplay is to have fun. That's, at the end of the day, we are all there to have fun. And as you interact with other people, we learn new things. We're exposed to new ideas, new ways of doing stuff. So there might be something that you're not aware of, and then you're role-playing with a group and it's like, wow, like this idea that they have, this is really fun. The way they're doing things is really fun. I want to try that out too. That's completely fine. Whether it's something you want to try because you've just been exposed to it, or maybe something you thought was a good idea and you've decided, not really a huge fan of it. You can pivot. Just make sure you communicate with your roleplay partners that you're making this pivot, just so they know. Most people won't mind, and they will accommodate your pivots. Like if you really want to change up something. Because like I said, the goal is you're there to have fun. And speaking of being there to have fun, the last tip I have is to always keep in mind that role-playing is a collaborative story. You know, the best role-play, in my opinion, comes from a group that has everyone helping each other both grow and evolve as your story unfolds. You are all there to... You're weaving an intricate tale where one day your character might be the primary story mover, and perhaps the next day you are a supporting character in someone else's adventure. That's fine, that's normal. You don't always have to be the center. Good role-playing groups will kind of shift around as the stories evolve. Different people will be the center at different times, and that's completely fine. And some people may not want to be the center, like my character, the way I initially played her, she was a supporting character in other people's stories, and I enjoy playing her that way. And I told people up front that was my goal. Hey, I'm going to be a supporting character in these stories. Now, eventually, she did spearhead some of her own stories, but it's all based on what the group is having fun with, what you are personally having fun with, and the direction that your overall story goes into. That concludes the 4 roleplay tips, and hopefully they were helpful for anyone that's been on the fence when it comes to getting into roleplay, especially roleplay in video games. I'd love to get into the specifics when it comes to individual RP communities themselves, but that would definitely be a very massive undertaking. Each one is vastly different, and they can be equally difficult to track down sometimes. The bulk of my roleplay experience in games comes from the Final Fantasy XIV community, which is where the character I mentioned earlier in this video is actually from. Feel free to leave a comment below if you have any questions, or if there's anything that you would like to share regarding roleplay that you experienced in video games, or what your journey has been so far trying to get into roleplay in video games. And with that, I'll see you all in the next video.